Brian Kelly was on the Game Day podcast with Reese Davis and the crew as we get into the summer months. I had a lengthy conversation with them, and there were a number of topics I'd like to broach over the course of this segment. But it does start with linebackers. I think there were some interesting things that Kelly had to say about his linebackers, and we'll get to Harold Perkins. But he first updated Whit Weeks and Harold Perkins. I think you know this by now, but those two guys are ready to rock.
We're in our, running program right now, and, our PLPs, which are our player-led position work and practices, they're in everything. So it's been a great recovery. They've worked really hard. I think our training staff has done an amazing job of getting both these guys to the point where they're already taking place in June activities and football-related activities. So both of them will be ready. Both of them are excited. They come into a year where they know a lot of the success will fall around them.
I don't think that's overstating it. Like, Whit Weeks and Harold Perkins have to be great players for LSU to be great this year. And Whit Weeks was second in the SEC in tackles last year. He's seventh most in the history of LSU in a single season. And Perkins has the ability to be a game changer. And one of the things that he's going to do is do some coverage work. And he's also going to rush the passer. He's also going to play the run, but they're going to have to make him versatile. And Kelly talked about the development that Perkins has undergone in using his athleticism in pass coverage.
I think that's why we moved him, Reese. We feel like he's shown the tools necessary to be in space. And look, he's not going to play man-to-man bump and run. He's going to be a trail player playing underneath with a safety over the top. He's going to be a spot dropper. And then we'll give him, the back coming out of the backfield, things that we know that fit his skill set. If you start doing things that, he's got to play man on the slot and they run an up route, you're not going to cover him.
And that's completely fair. Perkins has good PFF grades when it comes to his coverage. And again, that's not locking down slot receivers running double moves. That's making sure you're in the right spot when the running back leaks out into flat and running the trail, like you said, on those drag routes and using his speed and athleticism in space. He runs well enough to run with some skill position guys. I don't need him out there locked up with Alabama's number one, but he runs well enough in space to do a little bit of coverage. And I think there are probably a lot of LSU fans that'll roll their eyes at all that and say, no, get this guy on the line of scrimmage and rush up the field. And by now you know that that's not necessarily realistic on every single down and distance. But the staff is self-aware that last year and even the year prior, it wasn't perfect in terms of his utilization, and Brian Kelly spoke to that on the Game Day podcast.
Where we are with him is much more about settling him in and letting him play. Just go. Get your cleats in the ground, keep it simple, and go play. It got too complicated. We were trying to do too many things. We got too smart for ourselves. We got a really good player here. Let him go play. Let him feel comfortable every week and rip it, and I think that's going to help him quite a bit.
Isn't that exactly what you want to hear? Like, we did too much. We're going to do less. He's going to be fine. And I think there's reason to believe that. Harold Perkins is ridiculously talented. And I think he's going to have a great year this year in what will be his final year in Baton Rouge. But it's got to start great quickly because LSU opens at Clemson. We know this. Game Day made the decision yesterday that they're going to go to Columbus, which we all knew was going to happen. They'll be there for Ohio State and Texas. Corso will have his last headgear pick where he had his first headgear pick, but pretty big one there in South Carolina with LSU and Clemson, and Brian Kelly talked about it.
Clemson will be a great challenge, but one that I think more than anything else, we have a football team that can go on the road. And that's what you have to do. You have to have a defense that travels. And we finally have got the roster in a position where I believe these are the kind of games that you want to go and play, and you need to win them. And I'm not going to make any other statements other than the fact we need to win the opener because we're 0-3. And not that this will be a deciding factor of whether you get in the players or not. It is a long haul, but we need it, as a program. And for, as you mentioned, Pete, the fan support and people to be rallying around this team, which I believe is going to be an outstanding team.
I mean, that's about as blunt as you can be. We need to win the opener. It doesn't prohibit us from making the playoffs, but we need to win the opener. And y'all know how I feel about this. Like, I'm scheduling Samford in the opener. I'm bringing Nichols up from the Bayou for the opener. Like that, if that's allowed, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to Clemson for the opener, but I'm not calling the shots there at LSU. And Brian Kelly said, look, we're not gonna hide from it.
We've circled the game. And I've never done that before in openers. It's all over our weight room. It's all over our workouts. We're wearing shirts. I mean, we're doing the kumbaya of we're playing Clemson and we need to beat Clemson. So is that too much pressure? No, I think we've got enough mature veteran guys on this team. We had a clear conversation about why we were doing it, and they're all in on that.
I think that's fine too. I've never been one that, that thinks that you can trick college players into thinking that every game is the same. Now, look, I've won all of 0 college football games, and Nick Saban's won a bajillion of them. And he would tell you that I'm an idiot for suggesting that one game was more important than another game. You've got to be the same every time. And Jay Johnson says every game's a playoff. It's a 56-game playoff. I don't necessarily buy that one completely either. I don't think you can possibly treat a March game against Northwestern State on Tuesday in front of 300 people like you would a super regional game. I think that's an ambitious way to go about things. I don't think that the thought process behind it is flawed. I just think it's unrealistic to go ahead and follow through on that. But Brian Kelly's saying we're not doing that. We're not saying that every game's the same. We're saying we got to go beat Clemson. And whether you do that or not, I think you're going to be fine in week 2 against Louisiana Tech. So I'm fine with gearing the guys up. Brandon Taylor talks about this all the time. When they were getting ready for that 2011 season opener against Oregon, he felt like it transformed their offseason workout process. Oregon was coming off a national runner-up. They had, Heisman Trophy hopefuls, and they were a big brand, and LSU felt like they needed to raise their level all summer to get ready for that one game. Maybe that happens with this group. We'll see. But the deal is that LSU is going to have to be prepared to play in the game. You can wear the T-shirts and go through your workouts, but you've got to be ready to come out and play your best game in the first game. And if you watched LSU against USC, if you watched LSU against Florida State, you know that the team was a lot better 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks later than it was on Labor Day weekend. And Brian Kelly was asked, how do you make sure they're ready at the beginning of September?
Look, I've been in enough of these games. You go on the road, you better bring a defense. And I think this is the first year where I believe defensively, we have the pieces in place to go into a very difficult place to play and come out victorious.
He believes in the defense. I'm hopeful on the defense. They've certainly got a lot of new faces. They've certainly got some continuity on the coaching staff outside of defensive line. I'm hopeful that the defense is really good. What I feel good about it being good is LSU's offense, specifically at quarterback with Garrett Nussmeier. And obviously, entering the season, you're going to see the top of the SEC quarterback list that are going to have Garrett Nussmeier. They're going to have Lenora Sellers. They're going to have DJ Lagway. But they're also going to have Arch Manning. And I think those are the two guys that are garnering the most attention as you enter talking season here in the summer. And Brian Kelly spoke to the Nuss Verch Arch chatter.
There's another guy that hears it all the time too, and that's Garrett Nussmeier. He's more than anything else experienced. And in this league, you need to see the bullets flying. And your first venture into it, ask Jaden Daniels when he threw for 67 yards against Auburn. And so all I'm saying is Nussmeier's seen it. He knows what he's going to get. There's a confidence that he'll bring to each and every game that through experience, maybe even through some scar tissue, that's going to allow him to be, I believe, the best quarterback. Now, Manning is extremely talented, but he's got to go do it. And there's going to be a couple of days where it doesn't come out the way it's supposed to. How do you come back from that? So I can see the assessment of Manning. He's an outstanding player, but I'll take the guy that's been in the SEC and seen what it looks like.
The question's not whether or not Garrett Nussmeier can make plays. He can make plenty of plays. The question is, what about the bad plays and the risk-taking and the issues with the 3 interceptions against Texas A&M and turning the ball over 3 times against Alabama? And how does that get cleaned up in year 2? And Brian Kelly spoke to it.
It requires more than anything else, and I'll say this again, you got to go through those tough times to come out on the other end of it. We lost 3 games in a row, and look, he did not play very well. We turned the football over. We were up at half by 2 scores against A&M, and that game flipped because we made some poor decisions. And so I think you got to live through it. he played extremely well the last 3 games, and you could see that experience, and it carried itself into, our offseason in terms of understanding when to tuck it and run. He would not run when he needed to run, quite frankly, in certain situations. And I think you just got to go through that and experience it. And I think he has, and that's why I'm confident that from what I've seen in the spring, he knows what he needs to do this year.
Now, Garrett had a security blanket last year with that offensive line in terms of pass protection. Now, I'd wish they would run the ball a little bit better, but in terms of pass protection, that's about as good as you can ask an offensive line to play over the course of an entire season. And 4/5 of those guys are gone. So the question is, what's next for the offensive line? And I thought Brian Kelly gave a great answer on where this offensive line stands.
I think the last piece of this is just continuously developing your offensive linemen. And there's turnover every year. Look, everybody loses offensive linemen. It's your ability to have a system in place that develops them, and then when it's their turn, they're ready to play at a high level. And I think we're pretty good at it, and I think we're going to be okay on the offensive line.
Let's hope so. If they are, LSU's offense is going to score a bajillion points because they got skill guys and a good quarterback. They need to block. And if they do, LSU is going to be in really, really good shape, and they certainly need to block when they go to Clemson in that opener. So that's a look at Brian Kelly's chat on the College GameDay podcast with Reese Davis and the crew there from ESPN. If you're looking for our LSU content, you can find it at Hunt on LSU, wherever you find your podcast, and of course on YouTube as well. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.